Hey everyone, Hailey here, and I am going to give you some advice about how you can ask a professor for a letter of recommendation. Now, this is going to be particularly useful if you're looking for letters of recommendation for grad school, maybe an internship opportunity, anything of that nature. That's what this is for, so stay tuned. Number one, you always want to ask your professor early, especially if they are a professor and you're asking them in the middle of the term. They could have midterms or finals or just anything of importance going on during that time. So if you ask them early, it shows that you're respectful, you're thinking ahead, you're mindful of their time. The earlier, the better. I would say at least a few months before the deadline, ideally 2 or 3, if not more. It's always a good idea if you want, maybe like if you're graduating, for example, ask them when you leave, like, hey, in the future, would you be interested or would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? At that point, they'll either say yes or no, or just kind of entertain the idea. Then later on, you can send them the formal request. Now, what should your formal request consist of? I think it's very important to present yourself as a professional, especially if you're looking to go into graduate school, because it is a very professional endeavor. So you want to have everything, all the materials that you need gathered together. It would be great to either send a very, very nicely written email to them, or even schedule a meeting with them if possible. When it comes to asking them and also presenting them with the material, you definitely want to supply them with background about what you're doing, what the letter is for. If it's been a while since you've been in their classroom or since you've interacted with them, it would be good to give them a refresher. At the end of this video, I'll put in a screenshot of an actual letter that I sent to one of my professors, so you can kind of get an idea of what an appropriate tone for this email request would be. Odds are they'll probably remember you, especially if you've interacted with them before in office hours and whatnot. So after you make the initial request for the letter of recommendation, it's important to supply them with the materials they'll need to write a strong and thorough letter. What are they going to need? Well, one, they're going to need a copy of your transcripts, most likely, especially if it's for school. They're going to need to be able to see your academic performance and see how well you've done, not only in their classes, but just in your major and in your education in general. For grad school, it's important that they recommend someone who's going to be successful. Next, definitely include a copy of your resume or CV, whatever you want to call it. There is a slight difference. A CV is just a little bit longer, a little bit more detailed than a resume, but they generally include most of the same information. Let them know not only what you've done inside the classroom, but what you've done outside of the classroom. It's important to talk about extracurriculars, internships, anything that's relevant to this letter that could help them, give you a strong recommendation. In addition to those two things, if this is applicable to your situation, most likely if you're going to be applying to graduate school, it would be good to include a copy of your personal statement that you're writing for the graduate school, even if it's an early copy, even if it's not the final draft. Just let them know the direction that you're heading and how you're kind of advertising yourself to the school, so they know a little bit more about you. It does offer some insight to you as a person, so it's always helpful. So let's say that you've made this request, you've supplied them with the materials, they've accepted, they're happy to write the letter for you, everything is fine and dandy. Well, that does not mean that you just drop off and kind of leave it in their hands, leave them to their own devices. It is always, always, always good to send reminders. Trust me, you guys. They do have other things going on, like I said. So even if they are not intentionally neglecting your letter, they might be caught up in their own stuff. Send them a reminder with ample time. Just say like, hey, there's a month left to the due date or whatever. You can do so over email politely. You can do so without being pushy. Just be kind and just be like, this is deadline, just to let you know there are 2 weeks left. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need any additional materials. Another reason why it's important to send reminders, because if for whatever reason they change their mind, and don't be upset if that happens to you. Maybe there's just too much going on in their own life, or maybe they just changed their mind about writing you a letter, who knows? Just, thank them for their time. and move on. A very good practice personally, I think, when you tell them the deadline for the letter is to not actually give them the real deadline. I would say give them a deadline that's about 2 weeks before the actual deadline. That way, if anyone is late or if anyone is running behind, you have a nice little cushion of time. This happened to me. I set a deadline for one of my recommenders, as I just said, let's just say it was like January 1st or something. Well, come January 1st, silence. I didn't hear anything from her, so I didn't know what was going on. But the good news is that because I gave her that faux deadline and I built in some cushion for myself, I had extra time to find a backup recommender, and everything ended up working out. Overall, the important thing to remember with this is to be respectful and be grateful. At the end of the day, this person is doing you a favor by writing the letter. They're not really benefiting from it, only you are. So being mindful of their time is one way to show respect, but also remember to thank them. You don't have to, get down on your hands and knees and send them a box of chocolates. Actually, it might be considered unethical to send them any sort of voucher. Anything aside from a literal thank you letter could be considered bribery. Give them a sincere letter of your thanks and just say, like, this means so much to me. This is really helpful. Once again, you enjoyed their class or whatever, however you worked with them, and just let them know that you'll tell them what the results are. They will appreciate that, especially if they're a professor. They have to write a lot of these letters, and that's another reason to be respectful because you're not the only one. I'll give some time here for you to take a look at this letter, or a look at this email that I sent to one of my professors. I needed 3 letters of recommendation. I used this same basic format for all 3 and just changed it accordingly, depending on how I knew the person, whether they were my professor or mentor or whatever. And it worked out well. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm wishing you the best of luck in whatever endeavor you need this letter for, whether that's grad school or an internship. I hope everything turns out well for you. If you enjoyed this video or benefited from its content, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. I am constantly posting content regarding transferring from community college to UC, and also occasionally I post some things about myself, my own journey. I am currently going to grad school for speech language pathology, so if you're interested in that, give me a subscribe, whatever. Otherwise, I will see you all next Saturday at 3 p.m. Bye.